Riley Sager is here to talk about his newest book, Survive the Night, which just came out today. Survive the Night is the fifth thriller from Riley Sager, the pseudonym of an author who lives in Princeton, New Jersey. His first novel, Final Girls, was a national and international bestseller that has been published in more than 24 countries and won the ITW Thriller Award for Best Hardcover Novel. Sager's subsequent novels, The Last Time I Lied, Lock Every Door, and Home Before Dark, which received the Crimson Scribe Suspense Magazine Award. The rest of my bio was cut off there. Clearly, when I was copying and pasting on the website, I didn't do that right.
I'll take over. They were instant New York Times bestsellers.
The important part, yes.
And yeah, they're awesome.
We're so excited. So I read Final Girls before as a galley, and as soon as I read it, I was like, oh my God, I love this so much. Immediately gave it to McKenna, the store owner. It made its way through the staff. We couldn't wait to figure out who this person was, Riley Sager. And once we figured out who Riley Sager actually was, we were so excited. So it's been amazing to get to see the way that these books have taken off. And we're also super excited tonight to be joined by Abby Endler, who's one of our favorite people. She is the creator of Crime by the Book, a crime fiction review website and Instagram account. By the day, she is a publicist for a division of Penguin Random House. So for us, it's a treat to get to work with Abby, both to be able to do stuff like this and also professionally from the official book publicist side. She has led many author Q&As with us, and she's going to be back with us on August 19th, chatting with Serafina Nova Glass and Amber Garza. So while they are chatting this evening, please keep chatting in the chat, say hi to each other. If you have specific questions for Riley, or if you have questions for Abby as well, post those in the Q&A, not the chat. I'll be monitoring the Q&A more for questions to ask than the chat. So I'm going to let Riley and Abby get to it, and I will see you guys in just a little bit.
Thanks, John.
Thank you so much, John, for that amazing introduction. And Riley, a very happy publication day to you and Survive the Night.
Thank you.
Incredible. And I have to say, for everyone out there waiting to get your signed copies, it is going to be so worth the wait. This is my new favorite Riley Sager book, and I can't wait to hear what you all think of it. So, Riley, I have many questions.
Can I interrupt 1 second and be like, thank you all for like these pre-orders. Like, that's the reason like there's a delay. Like, it was just an insane amount of books where it's like, yeah, so it was like logistically imposing to get them from like there to here, and then for me to sign them, and from here to you guys. So yes, thank you for your patience, and thank you so much for like pre-ordering and for joining us tonight.
That's amazing.
This is
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And thank you, Murder by the Book, as well, for hosting us and for all the legwork that goes into making all of this possible. So, Riley, my first hard-hitting question for you here. I assume everyone watching has already been insanely like stalking Survive the Night online and knows exactly what it's about. But just in case anyone here doesn't, in your own words, what is Survive the Night all about?
So the short 6-word answer is a girl, a killer, a car. The long answer is it is about a college student named Charlie, and her best friend and roommate was recently murdered by a man known as the campus killer. And so Charlie is just overwhelmed with grief and guilt, and she just needs to leave campus right now. So she goes to the campus ride board, which the book takes place in 1991. And in 1991 and throughout the 90s, we in college did an insane thing where if you needed a ride home, you would go to the ride board, put up a flyer with your name and your phone number so strangers could contact you and say, hey, I'm going your way, get in my car. And we did it. And so it was almost like college sanctioned hitchhiking in a way. And so Charlie goes to the ride board and she meets a fellow student named Josh. And Josh is like, yeah, I'm going to Ohio as well. I'm going in the same direction. There's room on my car. It's yours if you want it. And Charlie's like, yeah. And as soon as they get on the highway, Charlie begins to suspect that Josh might not be all he says he is. And in fact, could be a very, very dangerous man. And she is now trapped in a car speeding down a highway at night with him. And it just gets crazy from there. So that is that is survive the night. And Charlie basically has to survive this one night, and the book is almost real time. Like it is, the events of the book are like literally like 6 hours. And so about like the time that it takes you to read the book is how much time passes in the book.
It's so awesome. And I have so many questions about structure and pacing and everything, because it really is such a gripping read. But first, I would love to know, can you identify kind of a particular moment that sparked the inspiration for this story?
Yeah, the main inspiration was Home Before Dark almost killed me. And so it just like Home Before Dark with like the dual timelines and the literal book within a book. Like as I was moving into and renovating a house, like doing all of that at the same time, like after Home Before Dark, I was just like a shell of a human being. It was that difficult to write and finish on time.
Yeah.
And so I knew I needed to do something completely opposite.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I want to do something really narratively simple, maybe not emotionally simple, but narratively simple. Like, I want to do something that's just fast, no dual timelines, definitely no book within a book.
Yeah.
What can be like the most distillation of suspense possible, really?
Mm-hmm.
And I got this idea in my head, and I wish I could remember when or how. I must have been seeing something about film noir movies or something, but this idea just popped into my head. Film noir, Little Red Riding Hood. Yeah, and I don't know how, like, and it was like, what's that all about?
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
Yeah.
What if it's just two people in a car?
Yeah.
And one of them is a killer. And one of them, and so like, I just thought it was really great and exactly what I was looking for. I just wanted something as basic as possible. And you cannot get more basic than two people in a car. And that's most of the book is.
Yeah.
When I see Gare. And yes, like almost a year ago, I did an Instagram live with Gare, and I was like, he was like, what's your next book? I'm like, Film Noir, Little Red Riding Hood. It was like,
I love the Little Red Riding Hood thing too, because I honestly didn't even think, but she is going home to see her grandmother. That's where she
wears a red coat, and she's literally going home to her grandmother. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. But you know,
and she gets a ride with a big bad wolf. Mm-hmm.
She absolutely does. And I mean, one of the things that I think the structure of this book facilitates is a really up close and personal reading experience with your characters. So I'd love to talk a bit about Charlie, because I know I am far from the only reader who loves a Riley Sager protagonist. You write such iconic leading ladies, and Charlie is an incredibly worthy addition to your kind of pantheon of final girls, I would say. So I would love if you could kind of introduce us to Charlie. How would you describe her to someone meeting her for the first time?
I love Charlie. Charlie might be my favorite. I don't know. But Charlie is, and I'm saying this with kindness, Charlie is a hot mess. Like she really is. Like she's been through a lot. Her parents were killed in a car accident when she was a teenager. So she's been living with her grandmother, and then her best friend and roommate is murdered, and so like Charlie has this thing where she deals with her pain and her trauma by just immersing herself in movies. Yeah. She is a film studies major, which is what I happened to be in the 90s, and so she just immerses herself in movies, and that is her comfort. And I do that as well. Like when I'm sick or feeling down or just need a break, I literally like climb into bed, go to Disney Plus, and just it was like, hello, Mary Poppins, take my stress away. And that's, but Charlie does that with like every movie. Yeah. And it's gotten so much so that she has a psychological issue, and you know that it's a psychosis basically, and it is hallucinations, but she calls them the movies in her mind. And it's when her brain can take only so much stress that like a switch flips in her brain, and she starts to sort of perceive the world as a movie. And so she's like, watching the events happen and it's not happening to her. And so that's
Right.
like her self-defense mechanism.
Yeah, it's her like escape hatch when things are too much, basically.
Right. And for the most part, it's helpful to her.
Right.
Except when you're in a car with a person you think might be a killer.
Yeah.
That's not so good because she starts to doubt herself and what's real and what's a movie in her mind. And so there's mind games going on constantly in this book. It's her doubting herself. It's her doubting the man driving her. Mm-hmm. It's me playing mind games with you, the reader.
Yep. And
so it's all very like, it is mostly just two people in a car, but there's a whole lot of messing with heads going on this long drive into the night.
Absolutely. And there are so many people in the chat talking about how Charlie being a hot mess makes her relatable. And I have to say, that's definitely true. She's one of my favorite protagonists of yours as well, because she is a mess, but you also understand why she's a mess and you feel for her and you're rooting for her. And her character arc, I think, is one of my favorites of any of your protagonists. And obviously, I don't want to spoil anything, but I wonder if you could kind of share how you sort of envisioned, the progression of Charlie as a character over the course of the book.
Yeah, definitely. I saw Charlie as and I think a lot of us are this way unintentionally, but like she was sort of a supporting player in her own life. Yeah. Like she was like best supporting actress in her own existence. And through the course of the book, she learns to become the leading lady of her life. And, that involves many different things. And to say some of it is spoilery, but like, it is like, those of you who really like my protagonist, you will, I think, love Charlie. And she's infuriating sometimes because she makes decisions where you're like, why are you doing this, Charlie? Why? And it just, but also there's like, she has a good reason for doing what she does, even if you might not agree with it.
She definitely does. And now you've mentioned, Charlie is a film major. You mentioned that you were a film major. And I'm curious, when you set out to write this book, how much did you know from the beginning of your writing process how influential movies would be on this story?
Oh, all of it.
All of it.
I knew like this was, it's funny. Like it's very much, I wrote pretty much all of the book like during the pandemic. I had the idea before the pandemic hit and I knew like this is going to be my next book, but the actual composition wasn't until after, because there's like before times and after times, and it was definitely written in the after times. And part of it was really, it just was so nerve-wracking and so difficult to concentrate and focus on writing. So I tried to make it as easy as possible on myself. And so and so someone could call it laziness, but I like to call it comfort. But just going with something that I knew. Yeah. And so like, I was a film major, Charlie was a film major. I knew all the movies that she's referring to. I didn't need to look anything up. Yeah. It's set in November of 1991. I was a senior in high school, and I remember that time with crystal clarity. So there's no need for any research at all. Right. Like I even knew like when movies like because Charlie would refer to lots and lots of movies. Yeah. And so I knew like, okay, Silence of the Lambs was February 1991. Thelma and Louise was May of 1991. Yeah. Beauty and the Beast was a week after the events of this book. So Charlie had not seen it yet, so she cannot reference Beauty and the Beast.
Impressive, honestly. That's impressive.
So, and I knew like the music like that was used. And so it was just, I knew everything about the time period and her mindset. And even the stretch of highway they take. Wow. Is how I get home from here in New Jersey to my parents' house in Pennsylvania.
Oh my gosh.
Interstate 80 through the Poconos, I knew like the back of my hand. And so I didn't need to be like, okay, let's do a field trip and see what this road is like. It's like, right. I've driven this road hundreds of times. I know exactly what it is like.
That's amazing.
So it made it easier for me to like finish a book when the world was on fire and insane.
Absolutely. And so obviously, I know there are folks watching this right now because I see their names in the chat who've been participating in our movie nights over the past couple of weeks. So I have to ask, if you had to pick one movie that was the most influential on Survive the Night, what movie would it be and why?
Goodness
You know, these are the hard-hitting questions.
It is. Well, it's hard because the one I thought of like the other night that is not mentioned in the book, and we didn't do a movie night of it, but so I'll do the one, Shadow of a Doubt by Alfred Hitchcock. That's where Charlie gets her name. There's in the movie Shadow of a Doubt, it's a young girl named Charlie who's named after her uncle, and she suspects that he might be a serial killer. And so Charlie in the book was literally named by her parents after this character in the Alfred Hitchcock movie. And so Shadow of a Doubt is a very good one to start. That might be the best one. I see Joseph Cotton Awesomeness. Yes. But I didn't think of this until literally like yesterday. Misery. Yeah. Yes. I see like you get Misery.
Yes.
Because it's like two people confined in a space and one of them is
the mind.
And I didn't even put it together. I'm like, oh my God, I think I was totally influenced by Misery and never even realized it.
Wow, I didn't think about that at all, but I completely see that parallel.
It was when I thought of it like mid-interview yesterday with a podcast I was doing. And I was like, I'm sorry, I have to pause here because my mind has just been blown.
Funny. That's amazing though. I totally see that. Yeah. Two people locked in this like very tense and murky kind of who's good, who's bad, what wow.
And there's no escape, really.
No escape.
Yeah. It's
oh my gosh. Wow. That is so good.
That was a new whole like weird like after that moment I'm like, I don't think I know anything anymore. Like what is reality anymore? Like because I can't believe I never like put it together before until yesterday afternoon.
Well, so we've spoken about Charlie, who's one half of the equation in this book, and the other half is Josh, the big bad wolf in our story. And I would love if you could kind of describe him to us. And I mean, tell us a little bit of how you kind of conceived of this character.
I conceived of I read a review today of Survive the Night, and it was a very lovely review, and they mentioned quite astutely how Josh was very Ted Bundy-esque. And yes, that's kind of what I was going for because, fun fact, I went to Penn State University, and in 1969, I believe, someone was murdered in the library.
Oh my gosh.
It's the craziest thing. Like a young woman was stabbed to death in the library in like the middle of the afternoon.
Oh my
gosh. And people kind of thought like because it might have been Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Wow.
And Ted Bundy, the way he got away with what he could do is because he was a good-looking, seemed like a nice guy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the qualities Josh has. Like Josh is just he's big, he's muscular, he's handsome, he seems like a nice guy, and he seems kind of trustworthy enough for Charlie to be like, okay, I will get in the car with this seemingly decent grad student who just happens to be going to Ohio. And yeah, so it really was kind of like Ted Bundy was kind of the inspiration for him.
Wow, that's so cool.
Because of like my college experience of like learning that like, oh my God, Ted Bundy might have literally murdered someone in the library that I'm in like every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this seems like such a personal book for you. I mean, you've mentioned so many things now that are drawn from your own life or experiences or interests. That's really cool. Do you feel like this is your most personal book yet in that way?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is 100% like the most personal book I've written. And from like a standpoint of just all of my interests are there. Like
Yeah.
it's like when my husband read it for the first time, he just was like, yeah, this is you. Like this is all you. This book
Yeah.
is
That's
this is
amazing.
your brain on the page. And I'm like, yeah. And I really do think it was partly because of the pandemic, where I
Yeah.
just you needed comfort where you could find it. And
Yeah.
for me, it was returning to the familiar and the nostalgic. And I really did find comfort in listening to the music I listened to like in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thinking about like just all the things of that time, because
I love that.
even if it wasn't the greatest of times, when you look back on it with 30 years distance, you're like, yeah, those were golden days. That was a
The
nice
nostalgia.
time.
I love it. Well,
I think when I was a high school senior, I was probably like, I hate everything.
That's
But now,
right.
30 years later, I'm like, what a wonderful moment in my life.
I wonder if we'll ever look back on 2020 and think that, probably
Yeah.
not.
Oh, God. Probably. I hope not.
Probably not.
In 2050, we're all going to be like, yeah, 2020 still sucked big
That
time.
was still the worst.
It was the awful worst.
Well, let's talk about the 90s, because I loved the fact that you set this book in the 90s. And I was curious, I mean, first of all, just kind of a broad question, and you've alluded to this a little bit already, but I mean, how did you narrow down that 1991 was the exact year you wanted to set this book?
Well, one, I knew it had to be in the past, because today this plot would not happen. Like the book would be 5 pages.
Right.
It'd be Charlie meets Josh, then she Googles Josh, and then she looks up Josh on Facebook, and then says, no, I'll get an Uber instead. And that's an end of book. Yeah. So I knew it had to be in the past, where there are no cell phones.
Yeah.
There's no GPS. And you are at the mercy of payphones and literally the kindness of strangers. And this is, when I was a senior in high school, like there was a night when it was a Saturday night, it was like 11:30 and my car broke down. And I couldn't call because I didn't have a phone. And so like I had to walk down this empty country road and to the nearest, knock on someone's door at like 11:30 at night and be like, hello, my car broke down. May I enter your home and use your telephone? And they let me.
Wow.
And this is what people did, because when like at my own house, we lived in the middle of nowhere, and if someone broke down, like there would be people coming to our door at night saying like, hi, could you let me in, and use their phone. And we were just so much more trusting back then.
Yeah.
And so I knew that like 1991 was a great time to do it, because it was just right before technology started to take over everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's in the past, but it's not crazy in the past.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Like,
yeah, definitely.
And also Nirvana.
I mean, and also Nirvana. Yeah, let's talk about the music, because I love the music references in this book. I mean, how did you decide what songs to reference, and also why was that important to the story?
Well, I wanted there to be kind of a soundtrack to the book, basically. Yeah. And there are a lot of mentions of songs and bands that I listened to in high school. And I just get a message, so if I freeze up, everyone, I apologize.
All good.
Am I good?
You're coming back, and you froze for a second, but you're coming back.
Okay. Now what if I pretend to freeze? Like,
where's
mine? But so like I knew like one of the first things that popped into my head when I was thinking about the book was this, just you get sort of like when you're just thinking about the book and plotting what you want. One of the first things that I thought of was just an image like a man and a woman in a car mistrusting each other as Come As You Are by Nirvana starts playing on the tape deck.
Love it.
And that's when I was like, I absolutely need to include that, in this book. And so I knew Nirvana was going to be like very important
I love
just to the soundtrack of this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you created an actual soundtrack for the book, right? Is there a playlist that people can look up?
There is a playlist, yes, on Spotify. Yeah. I will. Oh, I wish I had like copied and pasted it before coming in here, and then I could have put it in the notes.
I should have thought to do that. Maybe Emily will have a link to it and she could drop it in the chat for people if they're interested. Sorry, Emily, putting you on the spot here.
We're sorry, Emily. We're like spur them on. We're like, hey, link to things.
Oh, John is looking it
John
up.
is.
Thank you, John. Yes, that's awesome. That's going to be so cool. We totally need that. And I mean, I was thinking when I was reading this book, I feel like you do such an amazing job of making it such an immersive and authentic experience. You really build this whole world between these two people, mostly just in a car. Aside from the music, were there any other little details that you felt were particularly important to kind of build that authentic sense of time and place?
Well, I liked the thing about this stretch of Interstate 80, having driven it many times at all hours, is I love driving it at night. Mm-hmm. And there were some times when, you know, I'd be like leaving my parents' house. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go back home, and it'll be like 10 o'clock. And they're like, are you what? And I'm like, I love to drive at night. And I do. I love driving at night. And in this particular area of the Poconos, it's very high altitude. And so there's often fog and not a lot of people. And so I love, like, there have been many times when I'll be like driving there and not another car in sight. And there'll be like fog and mist everywhere. And it's just so mysterious. And I wanted to capture that. And so there is like sort of like the weather plays a part. There is like they hit a fog bank, and there is like some snow because it's middle of November. And I really wanted to give it this idea of like, this is
totally.
Yeah. And then also, of course, movies.
Yep.
The movies there are a gajillion movie references in this book because that's how Charlie thinks. Like she doesn't just have movies in her mind, but she thinks like, okay, what would this person do?
Yes. In
this movie? And like she uses them as like a frame of reference for how to behave. And that's why I say she is kind of a hot mess sometimes. Because normal people don't do that. But cool people do that. But so there's just movie references all the time, and I liked using them because, one, you know, I love movies, obviously, and I think everyone loves movies, and everyone goes to the movies and watches them, and even if you haven't seen a particular movie, you might know about it.
Yeah.
So people who haven't seen Psycho know about the shower scene.
Right.
And so it's a great emotional shorthand. Like so when Charlie references a movie and people are familiar with that movie, they'll know exactly what she means and exactly what she's thinking. And it's like this nice bonding experience between her and the reader.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just a random anecdote, but one of my personal favorite smaller things about this book that I thought really brought the time period to life was the diner. Charlie and Josh stop at this diner and they meet this amazingly grumpy waitress there. Her name is Marge, I believe. I loved those sequences. I thought they were so great, and they really, to me, just felt so true to the 90s. I loved that aspect of the book. It's small. I mean, it's one of the few times that they're outside of the car, but I loved it.
Guys, Abby just gave a spoiler. They get out of the car.
Oh. Mostly sad.
No, I'm assuming everyone, like, you get, like, it's like, they do eventually leave the car. So, but yes,
it is mostly set in a car. I didn't mean to spoil anything. I'm very sorry.
God, Abby, thanks.
Oh my gosh. Oh no, I'm canceled. Oh,
Can we get someone else in here, please?
Rude. Okay.
We're sorry, Abby. You're wonderful and we love you.
Thank you. I know. Okay, so another thing that we've alluded to is just the fact that this is such, again, most of the book is set in a car, a very claustrophobic environment. And I was curious, as a writer, when you began writing the story, I mean, were you ever concerned about like how to maintain that tension in such a fixed location for so much of the book? And if so, I mean, how did you approach that? Because you do an amazing job and it is riveting, even when it's just two people sitting in a car talking.
It was a challenge that I set out for myself. Like, I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I like to kind of always give myself a little challenge with each book.
Yeah.
And so with this one, it was definitely, okay, how can I wring as much suspense out of two people in a car as possible?
Yeah.
And so I started brainstorming about like, what are the ways? And one of them was the movies in Charlie's mind where she doubts herself. And then there were other things that happen that I don't want to say, but like there were like even something as simple as like a car game. Like everyone, when you're on a car trip, you're like, oh, let's play a car game. There is a scary ass car game being played in this book that I just was so, when I thought of it, I was like, yeah, that's gonna work. That's
so
yes. And so like it really was just trying to come up with like ways to keep the tension as high as possible when it is just two people in a car.
Yeah.
And I really tried to put the reader in the passenger seat with Charlie. Like I really wanted it to feel like you are sitting there with her and there's just no escape. And I didn't know if it was working or not until like my husband read like the first 150 pages. And he went up to his office and he read it, and then he came back downstairs and he was like, that was really stressful. And I'm like, yes.
Love it.
Like,
I love it.
Goal. So yeah, but it really was a challenge. Like I wanted to be like, how can I keep them in this car as long as possible and make it as suspenseful as possible? And it took some imagination to do so, but I really think that like I tried my best, guys. So.
You nailed it. No, you nailed it. And something that I know we're running out of time here, but something that I loved was something you alluded to earlier, which was just the kind of ever-shifting perspective that you give readers on these characters, especially because of Charlie's hallucinations, the movies in her head. You just, as the reader, never quite know until the end of the book. I mean, is Josh actually this bad guy? Could it be that Charlie's kind of projecting something onto him? I loved that kind of murky gray area that you explore between people. It felt very noir to me. I loved it.
And there's also like to go back to Charlie a little bit, like, oh, people could, oh my God, she's so stupid. Why is she making this wrong decision? But there's also a little bit of nihilism in Charlie, where I think she kind of thinks that she deserves to be in this situation.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's she's like, as for like the most like narratively simple book I've ever written, it's probably the most emotionally complex that I've written. Like Charlie is just a big old ball of like psychoses, and you like her and you fear for her and you doubt her and you're like, God, Charlie, why? And so like I really think that it's just I love her because she is so utterly complicated.
She is, and that's why I said her character arc is incredible. I think that's why it's one of my favorites, because it's so complicated and you're just rooting for her every step of the way. And okay, everyone watching, reminder to put your questions in the little Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. I'm going to ask Riley.
There are a lot of questions in that Q&A box, aren't there?
A lot of them in there already. I'm going to ask Riley one more question here on my end, and then we're going to turn things over to audience Q&A and get to as many of your questions as we can. Okay, no spoilers, I promise. But the ending of this book is it is going to be my favorite reveal of the year, possibly one of my favorite reveals ever. It is mind-boggling, brilliant, and so fitting for this story. And I have to know, again, no spoilers, but when you began writing this book, did you already know exactly how you wanted it to end? And if so, did you stick with that plan, throughout your writing process?
Yes.
Yes, I love it.
That's all I'll say. Yes, and I love the ending too. And that was the plan all along. It's weird. Like normally I'm a big outliner. Like I'll outline everything. I didn't outline this book.
Yeah.
Like
wow.
I knew where we were gonna go. Like I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is the end. And there are even certain aspects like how it ends up, like I didn't quite know.
Wow.
But I knew what the end game was going to be. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get into the car and just drive and see which route we take to get there. So like I knew where we'd end up. I just didn't know how we were going to get there.
I love it. Well,
I love,
you nailed it.
I love the ending too. Like I think it might be a little bit divisive, maybe. I don't know. I hope people love the ending as much as I love the ending.
I mean, I loved the ending so much. I think it's going to be impossible for anything else this year to live up to it. And it's going to be one of my favorites of all time. It is brilliant. And like I said, just so fitting, just perfection. So with that, Riley,
I'm super proud of it. Like when I came up with it, I'm like, yeah, I'm impressing even myself right now. Like me
for coming up with that. It is so good. And I can't wait for everyone watching to be able to read it and see what we're talking about. And with that, I think we're going to turn it over to audience questions now. I see we have a whole bunch in the Q&A.
We do. So we're going to get to as many of these as we can. So Jerry wants to know, Riley, are there any Easter eggs that connect all of your books that people haven't figured out yet?
There is not in Survive the Night. There aren't in any of them. But, and I'm reluctant to say this, but it's finished and my editor has it. We're just going to make it better. But yes, in next year's book. So there we go.
Okay, so there are a couple of writing advice questions. So if you could give a piece, like one piece of writing advice for anybody, what would it be?
To just stick with it and believe in yourself. I mean, like I think my story is pretty widely known, but yeah, like I've written books under, my real name and they did not do well at all. Bad sales. And I still believed in myself. And so when I got the idea for Final Girls, it was like, this could really, really, really be something. And so like, I just kept trying. And so I think a lot of people probably would have given up before that. And so just have faith in yourself and just keep on trying and keep on writing and just, it might be a weird, long, convoluted road that will take up 3 different pen names, but like you might actually like I can't believe that 10 years ago, I was just like desperate for anyone to read my book. And now I'm a New York Times bestseller. So that to me is just crazy. And it was just because I'm stubborn. Like I just was like,
I forgot about the 3rd pen name.
Yeah, that was such a great book, such a sad, tragic story, what happened to it. Yeah.
So Livy wants to know what Taylor Swift song or album represents Survive the Night.
Ooh, gosh. Okay. Even though that's not like the context of the song, but I definitely think Treacherous from Red. Because I've quoted some of those lyrics on Instagram, but there's the line like 2 headlights shine in a sleepless night and I'll get you alone. That's the song.
All right. So several people have asked, do you find it difficult to write from a woman's perspective, and why did you choose to do female POV instead of male?
It was a happy accident because of Final Girls. Like that's the trope. Final girl. If it was a final boy, I would have written it from the point of view of a boy and my career would be completely different. But because it was a final girl, I knew that it would have to be narrated by a woman. And other than that, I didn't give it much thought. Like, I didn't think in terms of gender. And I know, like, when I say this, and I've said it a lot, and it might rankle some people because they don't believe me, but like, I look at it as, you know, like, character. Like, I don't think, what is this woman going to do in this situation? I think, what is, for instance, Maggie in Home Before Dark? How is she going to act in this situation based on her history with her father and her father's book and all of that kind of thing? So it's not about like gender, it's about their past.
What was the easiest book for you to write?
Ooh, I wouldn't, maybe this one, but I think it might be, maybe it was Lock Every Door. That one just really flowed really well for me, so.
You touched a little bit on this already, but what made you switch formats completely with this one and not having flashbacks?
Yeah, I really wanted to mix things up a little bit. Like and it's evident in the whole package. Like, you know, when you do 4 books, and they're all very different books, but they all sort of have like some sort of dual timeline thing going on. And I really wanted to not do that anymore. And they were all first person, and Survive the Night is third person. And there were multiple viewpoints. Like, you know, this might be spoiled. You don't just get to see Charlie's point of view of the events. You get to see other people as well. And it was just a concerted effort to do something slightly different. And, you know, and that's why the cover is different. Like, I love the style of my old covers, but we really wanted to be like subliminally, like, this is a Riley Sager book, and you get all that goodness that you come to expect, but it's also a wee bit different than what you've had in the past. So
you mentioned that you didn't have to do as much research on this one because you knew movies so well and you knew kind of when things were going to come out timeline wise, but what kind of research do you do for your other books, and about how much time do you spend researching before you start the book?
It depends. I mean, I purposely, I'm such a lazy writer. I don't like research because, like, my feeling about research is if you do a lot of research, then you feel like you have to use it. And so that's why you read some books and it's like, oh, here's 10 pages about how they used to harvest ice in 1910. And it's like, so I try to avoid that. And so I just try to focus on like plot and character. But I will give a shout out to my friend from college. The car that Charlie and Joss are driving in is a Pontiac Grand Am. And a good friend of mine in college drove this exact car. And when I realized I'm going to set the book in this car, I emailed him and I said, hi, you remember a lot about that car, right? Could you give me some information about it? And he wrote like 10 pages of everything you ever wanted to know about a Pontiac Grand Am. And I used maybe like a sentence. So thank you, Ben, for doing all that research. A little of it came in handy.
Oh my God.
Kira wants to know, are there any, if there's any unusual place or funny story about where inspiration struck you for any of the books?
I wish there were, but there's really not. No, it's all very, I can't explain when I get an idea. Like, it just, bing, it's there and it's there. And then if it's good enough, it'll stay there. And if it's not good enough, I'll forget it like a couple days later.
Yeah. A couple people have asked, what was your favorite book to write?
Again, I will probably say Lock Every Door. Every book is different. Every book like has certain stresses. Like, I fully admit, and I know many of you love it, and I'm so happy that you love it. I hated writing Lock Every Door. It was so hard. It was so hard. But I love that people love it now, but it was not an easy time for me.
Jenna wants to know, she's wondering if there are any urban legends that you might explore. Like she says, New Jersey has a bunch. And she loves that, you've taken inspiration from kind of movies and different kinds of movies, but have you ever thought about drawing on local urban legends?
Possibly. There's like, I always have like, there's always ideas that come in, and so I'll say yes, but I can't say which, if that makes sense. Yeah. Sorry. That's like such a non-answer.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you this one, Riley, but then I'm also going to send it to Abby too, because I'm sure she's going to have an opinion as well. So Caitlin wants to know, while we wait for your next book, who is another author you would recommend that is similar to your style of writing?
Oh, well, I mean, when it comes to Survive the Night, Taylor Adams. If you haven't read No Exit, read No Exit. It is so good. And his new one that just came out, Hairpin Bridge, is also really good. And it has a similar kind of like terror on the road kind of thing. So yes, definitely Taylor Adams.
And if anybody's interested in Taylor Adams, Sarah DeVello, who runs the Mystery and Thriller Mavens interview podcast thing, actually just interviewed him today. So that is up on the store's Facebook and YouTube channel if you want to hear Taylor talk about his new book. What do you think, Abby?
Okay, so I'm going to throw a different recommendation out there. This isn't necessarily a comp for Survive the Night, but I think Simone St. James has a very similar kind of, psychological suspense meets horror inspiration thing going on. Her book, The Sundown Motel, is amazing. If you loved the ghosty kind of vibe of Home Before Dark, that book is
so creepy.
So good.
I also will throw in on my end, if y'all have not read, and I know Abby has read this and loved it too, if you haven't read The Lost Village by Camilla Sten, I think it's definitely, and then there's also a really great book by Jennifer Wolfe called Watch the Girls that also deals with movies. The main character is an actress, so if you guys are looking for more read-alikes, any of those are all great. And I'm so excited about the new Simone St. James too. So
oh my gosh, I know.
The Lost Village, they asked if I could blurb it, and I was too busy at the time, and I was like, I'm sorry, no. And then I'm like, damn it, why didn't I get that book? It was asking me to take this book.
So good. Yeah. Such an incredible book. So good.
It was our, so I know a lot of you that are watching are fans of the Book of the Month Club. Murder by the Book has started its own subscription service. You can visit murderbythebox.com and get more info about that. The Lost Village was, I think, our March pick. And so when we send them out, we always send postcards that explain why we picked it. And then on the back, we mentioned some read-alike suggestions, and we mentioned Riley's book. I think we picked The Last Time I Lied, because with the camp, because that felt like
yeah.
Do you have a July pick yet?
We do, but I can't announce what it is. Our June pick was The Other Black Girl, which we loved, and our July one. So our July one, we can't announce it just yet, but it'll be they're on the way to the author to get signed right now.
And about The Other Black Girl, it's so good. And also Zakiya, Delilah Harris, is just an absolute delightful human being. And yeah.
So Yasmin wants to know, Riley is a fellow Disney fanatic. What is your favorite Disney movie and what is your favorite Disney ride?
Ooh, that is an excellent question. My favorite Disney movie is Mary Poppins. It is perfect. It is like Mary herself. It is practically perfect in every way. It's probably the movie I've seen the most. Favorite ride? This is a tough one. Goodness. Oh gosh, I don't know. I love them so much. You don't understand with like Disney fans. It's like really like it's.
Oh, I know.
I think maybe I mean, I would say Splash Mountain, but they're about to change Splash Mountain, so I don't know. I love Big Thunder Mountain. Okay, here we go. I'll do like there was like the Disney Park Stack Challenge that was on Instagram, and so I will compare. Like it was like make a book like compare it to a Disney attraction. So I did with all of my books. So Final Girls was Snow White's Scary Adventures. Last Time I Lied was Tom Sawyer Island. Lock Every Door was Tower of Terror, of course.
Perfect.
Home Before Dark was The Haunted Mansion, of course. And Survive the Night was Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
I love it. That's perfect.
Yes.
Yeah. So somebody asked, so Riley, and I'm also going to ask Abby this question too. And it's a tough one because I don't know that I can answer this question either. What is your favorite thriller or mystery book? Or if you can't pick a favorite, what is something that you read lately that you loved?
Favorite of all time? Ooh.
Hard.
Easy, man. It's easy.
Oh.
I have one go-to answer for this.
Does it involve Mr. Joe Nesbo?
You know it involves Mr. Joe Nesbo, The Snowman by Joe Nesbo. But I could be more inventive and share one that I read recently.
How is the
and loved.
restraining order going?
Are
you still allowed within 100 feet of him?
My book's back here. It's not going well for him.
So you've got Joe Nesbo. I don't know. God. I will say Agatha Christie, and then there were none because it was like the first thing I'd ever read like that. And I didn't know that books like that existed because honestly, until she wrote it, they didn't exist. And so that's just a wonderful idea that's still being used today again and again and again. And it works. It works so well.
It really does.
So we had a couple of writing process questions. So Riley, can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? And Catherine wants to know, has that changed at all now that you're putting out books, more books a year, or one book a year?
My writing process is when I get an idea and it doesn't go away, that's when I'm like, okay, I really need to like explore this idea. And so what I do is I sit in this chair with a mug of coffee and think. Just literally I sit and think for days and sometimes weeks, and maybe like sort of take notes about who might be interesting to fill this book with and what might happen, and then it's like, okay, I guess it's time to write it. And it evolves. Like I used to be a big outliner, not so much anymore. I used to write occasionally and wait for the muse to strike, and now like if I'm working on something, I write every day and I have like a specific set word count to meet. And so it's still evolving.
Allie wants to know, what is a horror trope that you will always watch or read?
Oh, I love a good slasher. Like, give me a person in a mask with a knife, and I'm probably there.
Agreed for sure.
Same.
Not in the mask with the knife, but watching the movie about the mask and the knife.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Chris wants to know, you mentioned that, you kind of you changed formats with this book. So what was your publisher's response to the format change? Were they concerned, or were they just like all in whatever you want to do?
They were all in. My publisher is awesome. My editor is awesome. And like really, I don't know how it works for other authors. What I do is I basically write almost like the jacket copy. It's like just a page, and it's like 4 or 5 paragraphs. And usually it does make it into the jacket copy. Like, so I just to give her an idea of what I intend to do with the book. And I just send it to her, and I'm like, this is the next book. And so far, knock on wood, she's been like, do it. And so there hasn't been any of this like, well, I have concerns about like so they've been so supportive, like 100% of whatever, I've tried to do.
Can you give us any hints about what the next book is?
None, except that it's, I feel weird because I get asked this all the time, and I mean, I love Survive the Night, and it's wonderful, and I hope everyone reads it and enjoys it. But you guys, the next book is insane. That's all I can say. I can't say anything about the plot, but it's just truly, it's
And then here is the inevitable film question. Any interest? Are we going to see any of your final girls on screen at some point?
You know what? I have no idea. Like it's true. It's truly like Hollywood is weird, and they're fickle, and I stay out of it as much as possible. Like I don't want to be, because I know Hollywood changes its mind constantly, and I don't want to be heartbroken all the time. So I literally know nothing about the development of anything, and that's by design. It really is like, just here's the book. Good luck. If you have questions, you know my email. But it's really just like, I don't know anything. So I really don't know what stage of development anything is in, or if it will actually like get made. Like I would love to see something get made at some point, but I really don't know.
So Abby, we had a question. Abby, what is your favorite Riley Sager book?
Well, for a long time it was Lock Every Door, but in all honesty, it is now Survive the Night. It has unseated even Lock Every Door for me.
So Paulina asked, she says she has the privilege to read an e-arc of the book, and it felt like a gift, but it killed her to have to wait for the release to be able to talk to people about it. Her question is, how hard was the wait for you, Riley? It must have been painful to wait to hear what people's thoughts.
It's so weird, because like publishing is so, like, you know, like I just admitted, like my next book is done and with my editor, and now we're going to revise, and this will not be coming out until like literally probably like a year from now. And so like there's just such a long lag time, and so like everyone can be focused and reading Survive the Night, and by necessity I'm already like moving on to a next thing. So it's weird and sometimes a little surreal. Like Lock Every Door just came out in Mexico like a month or two ago, and I did a whole big round of interviews in Mexico about Lock Every Door. I wrote that in 2018. I have like zero memory of some of the things that happened in that book.
I was gonna say, do you have to like refresh your memory, go back?
And so they were asking me about things, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't remember that. Like, could you elaborate? Like, because it's just been so like, in my mind there were like 4 books past then. So yeah, it's really crazy.
And I'm sure, Abby, you know this as a blogger, like it's tough when you read something that you love and you're like, I just want to shout about this from the rooftops, but then you're like, well, crap, this book's not out for like 6 months.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And like I find like, I feel like especially when it's a book you love so much, it's so hard to hold yourself back. And that was how I felt with this book. It's so hard. So I can't even imagine as the author what the wait is like.
It's really weird. It's all weird, because like I know technically that the book is out and people are reading it, and I can see they're posting pictures of them holding the physical book, but it's literally a thing I made out of nothing. Like it's like it was literally spun out of thin air and just words put on a page that became like this physical thing, and that's just always so trippy to me.
Yeah.
Every time it happened. Yeah.
So Ashley wants to know, have you ever had any of your characters stick with you post-publication, or are you kind of able to let them go once the book is done and you've moved on to the next one?
I've mostly been able to let them go. A lot, like they do, like I love all of them, and probably maybe a little bit too much, because, oh gosh, you lost power, Abby?
Am I still here? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can see you, we can hear you.
I lost power for a moment there. Okay, I'm still here. So sorry, guys. Oh my gosh.
No, we couldn't tell anything, but it just like you looked very surprised and frightened for a second.
I really was. I was like, oh my gosh, Josh has come to get me at my apartment.
No, but like I love them all, and I think like the one that probably stuck with me the longest was Quincy from Final Girls.
All right, so I think we are at about time for the evening. I wanted to say before we go, if you guys missed any part of the chat, we will get the video uploaded the next couple of days, and we'll send everybody a link. We will keep it kind of as an unlisted YouTube video that you'll be able to watch through the link for the next probably couple of weeks. Once Riley is done kind of with the whole tour, we'll make it public so everybody can watch it, but we'll send out that link. As I mentioned at the beginning, your signed copies of the books were just picked up from Riley's house today. They should be at the store tomorrow. So if you haven't gotten a shipping tracking info email already, you should be getting one the next day or two. We're doing everything we can to make sure we get your books packed up well so they make it to you in one piece and get you the right books sent out. I also wanted to send a huge thank you to Emily at Dutton, who helped us organize this. She's helped us organize the signed copies. She's wonderful. We are so appreciative of her being able to help us get this set up. Also want to send a big thank you to Abby for chatting with us this evening. So Abby, what do you have next coming up on Crime by the Book? Do you have an author chat coming up? What's up next for you?
Well, I'm actually hoping to arrange an author chat with S.A. Cosby. I'm sending out that pitch to his publicist and keeping fingers crossed because his new book, Razorblade Tears, is just incredible and it's coming out so soon. So I'm hoping to be able to chat with him. So stay tuned for more information on that hopeful author chat.
You just watched Jaws with him. Of course he'll talk to you.
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that Jaws kinship will, make this happen.
And Riley, you already told us that you can't give us any updates about what's next in the next book, but what do you have coming up next event-wise if anybody else wants to tune in again?
I will be at Poison Pen tomorrow. And then I'm doing it's a ticketed event, but it's with Chester County Libraries in Pennsylvania, and it will be me and Jeffrey Deaver, and I'm super excited about that. And then next week, it will be me and Taylor Adams, so we can talk all about like Menace on the Road. And that will be at Mainstream Books.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us and hanging out with us this evening. Everybody who has been watching, thank you so much. I think I got to most of the variations of questions. But again, thank you all so much. Everybody have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much,
everyone. Everyone have a good night.
Bye.